a poor schoolteacher in the middle of a snowstorm, and the strange proposal of a wealthy cowboy. One winter night in Montana, the blizzard howled across the prairie as if it wanted to sweep everything away. In that storm, a young woman wandered, clutching nothing but an old cloth bag, panic in her eyes but still a flicker of hope when she spotted the faint glow of a ranch in the distance. Clara Dawson, a poor teacher who had just lost her job, her home, her money, reduced to nothing but the will to survive, knocked on the door of the richest man in 3 counties, James Whitaker. But instead of simply giving her shelter, James made a shocking offer. "Marry me. You need a roof, and I need a mother for my sons." A marriage not born of love, but of necessity. Yet, behind that door lay a journey neither of them could have imagined. That Montana sky was raging. The endless prairie vanished under blinding white. The wind howled like 100 wild wolves rushing down from the mountains. Snow whipped her face like 1,000 needles. Folks said January up here tested only the strongest and broke the rest. For Clara Dawson, 25, there was no choice. This storm was punishment fate had forced her to walk through. Clara had been a schoolteacher in town, teaching the children of miners, cowhands, and shopkeepers. She loved it, loved the laughter, the eager eyes spelling out their first words. But then the budget cuts came. The school closed. And in a single day, Clara lost everything. Her classroom, her room, the meager pay that kept her through the winter. She left town with nothing but a frayed cloth bag. Inside, a few worn textbooks, an old dress her mother had left behind, and 3 silver coins pressed into her hand by a kindly shopkeeper. No family, no roof. Clara wandered down the trail toward the outskirts, where the wind cut harder and the night fell faster. The storm hit sudden. Clouds rolled thick and black, crushing the land. In minutes, the ground turned white. The road vanished. Clara clutched her thin shawl, the wind nearly ripping it from her shoulders. Every step was like walking into an abyss, her old shoes soaked through, heels bleeding. She knew she wouldn't last the night. Out here, wandering in the storm was a death sentence. She thought of her mother, gentle, long gone since Clara was a child, who used to say, "When you're most desperate, find the light. It'll show you the way home." Clara whispered that line like a prayer, though she doubted there'd be any light in this blinding white. And then, like a miracle, she saw it. A glow. Small at first, then clearer. Clara blinked, thinking it was her weary mind playing tricks. But no, the light held steady, the warm yellow of oil lamps spilling across the snow. She stumbled, knees hitting the ice, pain burning her skin, but she forced herself up, dragging her frozen body toward that glow. Every step fought nature itself, but the thought of shelter, of fire, of a sip of hot water pushed her forward. Through the snow, the house emerged. Not a shack, not a miner's hut, but a sprawling ranch. A tall wooden fence, a horse barn, a roof buried under snow. And through the windows, warm lamplight spilled across the yard. The house stood firm, defying the storm. Everyone knew only one man owned a place like this, James Whitaker, a true cowboy, the one who'd single-handedly broken up a horse-thieving gang 7 years back. Wealthy, widowed, and above all, cold as steel. Clara reached the tall gate, hands trembling on the latch. She thought of the rumors, that James Whitaker never let anyone into his life again after his wife died, that his heart had frozen over, and only his 2 boys kept him tethered to this world. Plenty had knocked at this gate before. Few had stayed. But if she didn't try, she'd die out there. The wind screamed, snow lashed her back, her breath burned in her lungs. Clara drew one deep breath, bit her lip, and knocked hard on the heavy wooden door. The sound echoed into the night like a desperate cry for help. Inside movement, heavy boots, metal hinges creaked. Clara's heart pounded as the door cracked open, light flooding her eyes. A towering figure filled the frame, broad-shouldered, carved from stone, eyes sharp as a blade. Not curious, not kind. The eyes of a man who knew danger, who had lived with loss. For a heartbeat, Clara felt smaller than ever, a beggar before a throne. Still, she found her voice raw from the cold. "Please, just one night of shelter." The wind roared, the snow clawed at her back, but in that instant, everything stilled. Before her wasn't just a door. It was the line between death and life, despair and a chance at something new. James Whitaker stood tall in the lamplight, his face weathered not by years, but by war, loss, and the hard life of a rancher. His eyes gave nothing. His silence weighed heavier than the storm itself. Finally, he stepped aside. "Come in." Clara staggered across the threshold. The heat from the fire seared her frozen skin. Wet boots squeaked against the wooden floor. Two small figures peeked from the staircase. A boy about 8, his face far too serious for his age, gripping the hand of his younger brother, wide-eyed with tears and curiosity. Clara tried to smile, but it trembled with exhaustion. James shut the door behind her, sealing out the blizzard. "Sit," he ordered, voice deep, not unkind, but absolute. Clara collapsed into a chair by the fire, stretching trembling hands toward the flames. The smell of burning wood, drying hides, and strong coffee filled the room. James poured a steaming cup, set it before her. No sugar, no milk, just bitter heat. She sipped, warmth spreading through her hollow body. He stood with arms crossed, eyes never leaving her face. No pleasantries, no comfort, just that stare, reading her story without a word. Clara lowered her gaze. His silence was louder than any storm. Finally, James spoke. "Where'd you come from?" "Southtown. The school. Shut down. Her voice broke. James didn't flinch. He only nodded, as if he'd known. He stepped closer to the fire, the flames painting his features in steel and shadow. "Listen, Miss Dawson," he said, calling her by name somehow. "I don't let strangers in my home. But those boys need a woman in this house. And you," he glanced at her soaked shawl, "you need a roof if you want to live past tonight." Clara froze, staring. James continued, flat, direct. "We can make a bargain. You'll be my wife. Not for love, not for romance. A simple deal. I need a mother for my sons. You need shelter. That's all." The room went silent. The fire crackled. The storm wailed outside. Inside Clara's head, his words echoed like thunder. "You're joking?" she whispered. James didn't blink. "I don't joke. Life out here isn't for dreams. You accept, or you walk back into that blizzard. There's no third option." The boys clung to the stairs, wide-eyed, listening. Clara's heart hammered, not just from shock, but from the cruel truth. He was right. Out there was death. In here, even if only by a contract, was life. James gestured toward the stairs. "Think on it. By morning, I want an answer." Clara sat frozen, firelight dancing across her pale face. She didn't know if she was trembling from cold, from fear, or from the storm of fate that had just swept into her life. The morning after felt like the world had been scrubbed clean, as if the storm had tried to erase every trace of man. Snow lay heavy across fences and trees, the ranch yard a blank canvas. The cold pressed down on sound itself, every creak and clink muffled beneath the weight of white silence. Clara woke in a narrow servant's room, frost on the window, the relief of shelter already giving way to the truth. This was not a home, but a house ruled by order. No warmth, no softness, only survival. Downstairs, the kitchen gleamed with strict neatness. Two boys sat at the table. Ethan, 8, carried the look of someone far older, lips pressed tight as if laughter had died with his mother. Samuel, 5, leaned against his father, bright-eyed and eager. Ethan clung to memory. Samuel reached for something new. James Whitaker strode in, moving briskly through his routine, calling out tasks, voice clipped, his manner hard as winter stone. Clara stood aside, remembering his blunt proposal, a marriage not of love but of need. He offered food and a roof. She had nothing but 3 coins and the clothes on her back. Beyond these walls was death. Inside was life, but at a price. Ethan's stare cut her like a trespasser in sacred ground. Forced to grow too soon, he bristled at another woman's presence. Samuel, though, lifted his bowl and said softly, "Eat. Papa says you'll teach us letters." The kindness pierced her. She managed a tired smile. "Thank you, Samuel." The decision loomed. Out there, death. In here, life. But what frightened her most was not the cold. It was the chance of wounding these children's fragile memories, of being an unwanted shadow in a grieving man's house. James studied her, eyes hard but knowing. Finally, he spoke. "I promise nothing but a roof, food, and safety. I don't promise a title, only that if you stay, the boys won't starve, and you won't freeze." It was harsh, but honest, the only certainty she'd been offered in weeks. She thought of unpaid wages, evicted rooms, doors slammed in her face. Every road had led her here. Looking at her cracked hands, at the worn school books she still carried, one thought rose clear. She could give these children her voice, her knowledge, and perhaps rebuild herself in the process. Samuel hopped down, slipped his hand into hers. "You'll stay, won't you?" His eyes shone with hope. That touch melted her. Clara looked at James, then at the boys. Her voice came rough but steady. "I'll stay. Not for romance, but for survival, and maybe for a chance at something worth living for." James nodded once. No smile, but relief flickered in his eyes. Ethan stayed stone-faced, but perhaps, deep inside, a door cracked open. Samuel clapped with joy. And in that moment, over the hiss of boiling water and the pop of firewood, an agreement was sealed, not in love, but in necessity and fragile hope. Beside him stood Eliza Harper, the widowed neighbor who'd known the Whitakers for years. She had pressed a faded blue dress into Clara's hands earlier. "No veil, no ring, but at least something decent," she'd said, her eyes warmer than anyone else's that day. Clara stood across from James, her heart hammering not with joy, but with dread, her dress plain, hands trembling at her side. James, in his long brown coat and dusted boots, looked the same as always, cold, calm, steady, as if this were just another task to be done. Only a handful witnessed it: the Reverend Eliza, 2 ranch hands, and the boys. Samuel clung to Eliza's side, wide-eyed. Ethan stood with arms crossed, eyes dark and unyielding, watching every move. The Reverend's voice filled the room. "James Whitaker, do you take this woman to be your wife, to keep this home together, to raise your children in sun and storm until God calls one of you away?" "I do," James answered, firm, without hesitation. The Reverend turned to Clara, pausing. "Clara Dawson, do you take this man to be your husband, to keep this home together, to raise his children in sun and storm until God calls one of you away?" Clara's breath caught. She heard James's words from that first night: accept or walk back into the storm. Her chest tightened. At last, she whispered, "I do. No rings, no flowers, only the Reverend's solemn eyes and the fire snapping in the hearth. "And so I declare," he began, but a voice cut him off. "I will never call her mother." Every head turned. Ethan's voice rang like iron, his small shoulders squared. James froze. Clara's chest clenched as if stabbed. "I already have a mother. Her name is Margaret Whitaker. No one can replace her." The words struck like a hammer. Samuel's eyes filled with tears, clutching Eliza's hand. Even the Reverend faltered, recognizing truth in the boy's defiance. Clara's throat burned. She wanted to comfort him, to say she'd never try to take Margaret's place. But the words wouldn't come. Ethan had said aloud what she herself feared. She was only a stranger in a bargain, not a mother. James's fists clenched, knuckles white. He strode toward his son, then stopped midway. For a moment, conflict flashed in his eyes. Then his voice came low, gravelly. "Enough, Ethan. This is my decision, and you'll learn to respect it." Ethan didn't cry, didn't shout. He only turned his face away, eyes glistening with unshed grief. The Reverend cleared his throat, forcing the words through. "Then, I pronounce you husband and wife before God and man." No cheers, no smiles, only the pop of firewood, the wind clawing the windows. Eliza touched Clara's shoulder, whispering, "Don't let a child's words crush you." Time will speak, but Clara wasn't sure. Ethan's pain was raw, too real, too deep. James gave orders. "Set the table." "They're tired." He didn't meet Clara's eyes, nor his son's. He opened the door, the cold rushing in, then shut it hard behind him. The room fell into silence. Clara stood, hand trembling, eyes on the plain white cloth of the table. She was now a wife, yet she felt like an intruder. The true battle wouldn't be against the Montana winter, but against the wall of grief standing in her new home. The wedding was done, but instead of joy, the house brimmed with tension. Clara, the new bride, had been rejected the moment she stepped in. A marriage forged by bargain had begun with a fracture. The first morning after the wedding, pale sunlight pushed through the heavy snow around the Whitaker house. Clara stirred from a sleepless night. She was James's wife now, at least in name. Safety came with the title, but so did weight. Downstairs, the kitchen fire flickered. Clara set to work. Flour, beans, smoked pork. She kneaded bread, hoping its warmth might soften the silence hanging since the vows. Samuel came first, hair tousled, eyes brightening at her sight. "You're cooking?" he asked. Clara smiled. "Not just cooking. Today we'll learn letters too." His grin made her chest ache with warmth. Then Ethan appeared, thin, stiff, eyes like winter stone. "Where's Father?" he asked. "In the barn," Clara answered. "Eat first and then we—" "We?" Ethan cut her off. "I don't need you teaching me. Least of all you." The words stung. Samuel frowned at his brother, but Ethan only turned away. Clara steadied herself. Margaret's ghost still ruled Ethan's heart. She couldn't replace his mother, only prove she came to help. Later, Samuel traced shaky letters on a slate, Clara guiding him gently. Ethan lingered in the corner, whittling wood. "Ma never needed anyone to teach us," he muttered. The quiet jab pierced deeper than shouting, but Clara carried on, determined. By midday, she dusted chairs and set flowers in jars, breathing life into the house's emptiness. Samuel followed, laughing as he helped. Ethan watched from afar, arms crossed, his stare saying, "Don't think this will change anything." That night, Clara served stew. James gave her a faint nod. Acknowledgement. Ethan pushed his bowl aside. "Not as good as Ma's." Instead of bristling, Clara said softly, "She must have been wonderful. Will you tell me what meals she made, so I can learn?" For a moment, Ethan faltered, surprise flickering in his eyes. It was the first crack in his wall. Snow kept falling. At night, Clara sat by the window, whispering to herself, "You don't have to call me Mother. Just let me stay." Sunday brought the church bell. Wrapped in a gray cloak, Clara walked with James and the boys. Whispers met her at the chapel door. "That's her? The one replacing Margaret? So soon?" A teacher with nothing to her name. She kept her face composed, though her chest burned. During service, Samuel leaned against her shoulder. Ethan sat apart, eyes cold. Afterward, the crowd gathered outside, barbs flying sharper than the winter wind. "I recall you as a fine teacher," one woman sneered. "Shame you've chosen the easy road now." Another muttered, "Margaret's barely cold, and James brings home a new wife." Clara's cheeks burned. She wanted to walk away, but froze. The words cut at James, at the boys. She drew a breath. Then a small voice rang out. "She's not easy. She's kind. She makes bread for me. She teaches me letters. I like her." The yard fell silent. Samuel, cheeks red, fists clenched, spoke again. "She's here to help us. Nobody has the right to say she's bad." A ripple spread. Adults shifted, shame flickering in their eyes. Clara stood frozen, tears stinging. Never had she dreamed of being defended, least of all by a 5-year-old. Yet Samuel's innocence struck harder than any sermon. James, who had watched in silence, finally stepped forward. He set a hand on Samuel's shoulder. "That's enough," he told the crowd, voice carrying. "This is my house. My wife. My children don't need your poison." Silence reigned. Clara bent and pulled Samuel into her arms, her heart breaking and healing at once. Eliza Harper touched her arm and whispered, "You've found your place, at least with this one." Ethan lingered beside James, eyes unreadable. Not acceptance, not rejection. Something shifting, questioning. Could she be different? On the walk home through the snow, Clara held Samuel's hand. She carried more than a child's, trust. She carried a spark, kindled by his trembling courage. The whispers might return, Ethan's doubts might still smolder, but she had taken her first true step into the family. And in the stillness of the churchyard, one truth echoed louder than gossip. It had taken the voice of a child to speak what no adult dared. That Montana morning was gray and heavy, the valley veiled in mist. Snow had stopped, but the air pressed down with something ominous. Clara was tidying the kitchen when hooves thundered through the gate. A ranch hand, pale and breathless, shouted, "Mr. Whitaker!" The cattle, gone. A whole drove taken in the night. The rag slipped from Clara's hand. James strode from the stables, face turning to stone. He asked no questions, just moved toward the west fence. Clara, with the boys close behind, hurried after him. The sight was plain. Thick rails sliced clean, sap still fresh. Hoofprints stamped deep, horses mingling with panicked cattle. "Not wolves," James said grimly. "Steel. They knew where to cut." A hand whispered, "At least 10 head, sir. All breeding cows." Even one loss was steep. This was no theft. It was a warning. Someone wanted James Whitaker to bleed. By evening, the news spread through town. In the saloon, men muttered, "Whitaker's been hit. Railroad men want his land. He'll give in." Rumors reached James before nightfall. He sat before the hearth, glass untouched, fire snapping. Clara watched him, silent, until he spoke. "Harrison Blackwood. He offered to buy me out for the railroad. I refused. This is his answer." "What will you do?" she asked softly. "Stand firm. This is my land, my blood. No one takes it." Admiration warred with dread inside Clara. Once enemies drew blood, they wouldn't stop at cattle. That night, she saw James pacing the fence line with rifle slung across his shoulder. Strong, unyielding, but alone. Samuel slept under quilts, but Ethan sat awake watching his father's shadow. Clara knelt beside him. "You're worried for him?" Ethan nodded. "He's strong. But this time, I'm scared." Clara placed her hand on his shoulder. "Your father won't fight alone. There's me, and you and Samuel. We're family." Doubt lingered, but in his eyes flickered a fragile spark. Then the night broke. No moon, only darkness swallowing the valley. Clara startled awake at the sound. Hooves, shouts, laughter. "Whitaker!" voices bellowed. "If you won't sell, we'll take it another way." The gate splintered. Shapes swarmed in lantern light. Raiders. Clara rushed to the boys' room. Samuel sat up, wide-eyed. Ethan was already awake. "Quiet! Come!" She pulled back the kitchen rug, lifted the trapdoor. Damp wood and whiskey fumes rose. She lowered Samuel first, then gripped Ethan's hands. "You keep him safe. No matter what you hear." Not a sound. Ethan's jaw clenched. He nodded hard. His eyes shone as the trap closed. The front door shuddered under pounding fists. Clara snatched the rifle from above the hearth. Heavy, rough, but she gripped it like lifeline. The parlor was dim, only the fire low. She planted herself before the door, barrel aimed, heartbeat thundering. Glass shattered. A bearded brute climbed through the side window. He hit the floor. Clara fired. The blast split the night. Smoke filled her lungs. The man collapsed, blood soaking into the floorboards. She had taken a life. There was no turning back. Shouts erupted. "Armed! Watch out!" Hooves shifted. Men cursed. Then James stormed in from the barn, rifle raised. He froze at the sight. Clara standing firm, smoke curling from her barrel, a body sprawled at her feet. "You," he breathed, stunned. Her voice rasped. "The children are safe below. I'll hold this door." For a heartbeat, his eyes flickered. He had thought her fragile, but here she was, not a victim, a shield. Raiders surged again. James barked, "Hold steady!" 2 rifles thundered. Screams tore the night, then faded. Hooves pounded retreat, dwindling into silence. When it was done, the yard reeked of gunpowder and splintered wood. James bent over the fallen man, then turned to Clara. She stood trembling, rifle still in her hands. He touched the barrel gently, pushed it down. "Enough. You did well." Her knees buckled. James caught her before she fell. She shook, but her gaze was fierce. She had crossed a line, from desperate widow to part of the wall that defended this home. Below, Samuel whispered in awe, "She'll protect us." Ethan said nothing, but gripped his brother's hand tight. In his eyes burned a new light, respect, however reluctant. Outside, the wind howled, but inside, one truth was carved deep. Clara Dawson was no mere contract wife. She was protector, mother, and fighter. And James Whitaker, watching her with new eyes, knew nothing would ever be the same. After that bloody night, when gunfire finally fell silent and a dead raider was buried at the tree line, the Whitaker homestead sank into a silence too deep to feel like peace. Clara woke heavy-footed, echoes of shots still rattling her chest, the acrid scent of powder clinging to her hair. But what haunted her most was Ethan's eyes, no longer cold suspicion, but a storm of grief and defiance. While sweeping the back hall, she noticed a narrow door she'd never seen opened. The iron knob was icy under her hand, until footsteps came. Ethan froze at the sight of her. "Don't!" he blurted, voice cracking. Then he turned and ran. That night, faint light leaked through its cracks. Clara eased it open. Inside, dust covered a room preserved in memory. A faded dress, a wooden box of letters, and Ethan curled in a chair clutching a rag doll, his mother's. Tears streaked his face. "I miss you, Mama." Her heart twisted. His anger hadn't been rejection. It was fear of forgetting. She stepped in softly. "I'm sorry, Ethan. This is yours. Yours and your Mama's." "You can't be here," he cried, clutching the doll like a shield. Clara sank to the floor, keeping her distance. "I can't replace her. I wouldn't try. All I want is to care for you and Samuel." His voice broke. "If I call you Mama, does she disappear?" The question split her in two. Clara shook her head, tears rising. "No, she'll always be here. No one can take her from you, not even me. We'll remember her together." He trembled. "She used to sing me lullabies." "I'm afraid I'll forget her voice." Clara hummed an old lullaby from her own childhood. Tender, imperfect. Ethan didn't chase her away. Not ready to accept her, but no longer shutting the door. When she slipped out, she vowed never to erase Margaret's memory, only to add her own love. In the hall, James stood in shadow. He had heard enough. In his eyes was sorrow and relief. For the first time, he saw Clara not as a contract, but as someone who could reach the deepest corners of his fractured home. That night, wind shrieked over the plains. Clara sat by the fire, flames reflecting every storm she had walked through. James's cold proposal, Ethan's rejection, a gunfight that stained her hands. Yet she sensed something darker remained. The door creaked open. James entered, snow on his coat, face gray with burden. He poured whiskey, drained it, then spoke in a rasp. "Clara, it's time you knew the truth. Those raiders weren't outlaws. They were sent." By Harrison Blackwood. The name meant nothing to her, but the weight in James's tone chilled her. "Who is he?" "Biggest land baron in these parts. He wants the valley for the railroad. I refused to sell, so he turned to violence, his fist clenched. This is my father's land. I'd rather die than give it up." Her chest tightened. Railroads promised fortune, but often carved ruin. "And Blackwood? Why you, so personal?" James's voice dropped. "Because he wasn't always my enemy. Once he was my brother in arms." Clara's breath caught. "Civil War," James continued. "We wore the same colors. Shared rations, trenches, bullets. He saved me, I saved him. We were closer than kin. But after the war, I came home to build, to raise a family. He chose power, land, money. And now he comes at me with a knife." His eyes burned like coals. "To him, land is coin. To me, land is blood." Clara's throat tightened. This was more than property. It was betrayal of brotherhood. "How does it feel," she whispered, "to know a man who once fought at your side now seeks your ruin?" James leaned back, gaze fixed on the rafters. "Like a bullet lodged in the heart. Doesn't kill you outright. Just bleeds you slow." Her vision blurred with tears. She had thought him only stone hard. Now she saw the abyss he carried. Grief of a widower, the weight of fatherhood, and the sting of betrayal by a brother once called friend. She leaned closer, voice steady with vow. "You're not alone, James. No matter who Blackwood is, you still have me. You have Samuel and Ethan. Together, we'll protect this home." James's eyes met hers, and for the first time flickered with trust. Faint, but real. He nodded, as if clinging to her words like the last truth he could bear. Outside, the wind wailed across frozen fields. Inside, by fire's glow, two souls shared a burden too long buried. Their marriage was no longer a bargain. It was a battle joined. Ethan clung to his mother's memory. Clara promised to honor it, and James revealed the enemy. Harrison Blackwood. Not just a land baron, once his brother in war. That Montana morning, Sunlight cut across the valley like a bright blade after a long storm. Yet peace was nowhere to be found. Whispers carried of a showdown no one could avoid. Blackwood, the land baron whose shadow loomed over the valley, had finally shown his hand. For days James had walked the town, calling on neighbors to stand with him. Clara was never far from his side. She wasn't just tending meals. She faced the people herself. If we step back today, tomorrow this land won't belong to our children. Her words stunned them. Once a contract wife, she now burned with conviction. Calloused fists clenched. A spark became flame. By afternoon, the valley gathered at the Whitaker Ranch. Men with rifles, women with torches, young folk with rope. And when hooves thundered from the north, Blackwood and his riders rode in as if they already owned it. He sneered at James. "Stand against me, and it will only end in death." Before James could reply, Clara stepped forward. "No, Blackwood. It's not just James, it's all of us. We will not bow." The crowd roared as one. "We will not bow!" Blackwood raised his hand. Rifles snapped up. The air thickened. Then the first shot cracked. Chaos erupted. Bullets tore through wood. Horses screamed. Townsfolk scattered and fought back. Clara did not hide. She cut toward the stables, rifle steady. She barred a narrow pass, her shots felling 2 men. The others were dragged down and bound. The gunfight thinned until Blackwood himself was cornered. James leveled his rifle. "It's over, Harrison." "You never changed," Blackwood spat, "still clinging to things already lost." Clara stepped beside James. "No, it's you who never changed. You betrayed this land. You betrayed the man who once called you brother." Murmurs spread. For the first time, the valley saw Clara as more than a bargain bride. She was the voice of the land itself. Blackwood was bound and dragged away. Cheers rolled like thunder. The heavy cloud over the valley lifted. James turned to Clara, pride breaking through his guarded eyes. From the crowd, a voice cried, "If not for Miss Dawson, we'd have lost it all today." "Clara! Clara!" they chanted. Tears welled as she realized she belonged. That spring came late, but glorious. Wildflowers painted the meadows. Rivers whispered renewal. The Whitaker Ranch thrived. Barns rebuilt. Laughter alive within the house. On the day the valley gathered again, it was not for war, but for celebration. Clara stood before an old mirror in a simple white dress, lace at the sleeves. It was no grand gown, but to her, it was the most beautiful of all. For today she married not for safety, but for love. Samuel bounded in with a bouquet. "Mama Clara, these are for you." She knelt, tears shimmering, as Ethan stepped to her side. "I'll walk you out, Mama," he said, steady and sure. When Clara stepped outside, silence fell. Every eye followed her across the green grass, Ethan at her side, Samuel scattering petals. James waited tall and solemn, his eyes no longer cold, but lit with warmth. The preacher spoke. "We gather not to witness a bargain, but to bless a love." James turned to Clara. 6 months ago, I needed a mother for my boys, and I thought of you. But now I know the truth. I need you to keep my heart from being empty. Clara's tears spilled. I stepped into your home to survive. But in the journey, I found something greater. A home, a love, a family. They were declared husband and wife. Cheers roared. Samuel clapped wildly. Ethan smiled, truly smiled, for her. The feast stretched long into afternoon, laughter spilling across the fields. Clara's hand rested in James's, joy blooming as she watched the boys run. At sunset, with the sky burning gold and violet, the family stood on the porch together. James's arm around Clara, Ethan at his side, Samuel leaning against her shoulder. Beyond them, the prairie stretched wide and endless, and Clara knew, from a storm-bound bargain to this springtime vow, they had become a family, not by contract, not by compromise, but by love. Beneath the Montana sky, the tale closes, but its echo lingers. From a cold bargain struck on a stormy night, Clara and James found a true home. Two boys gained back a mother's embrace, and a hardened man's heart finally healed. Perhaps in our twilight years, we know it best. Happiness isn't gold or land, but a hand to hold, a home to return to, and a family to love. Dear friends, what touched your heart most in this journey? Share your thoughts with a simple 1, 2, 3, or A, B, C below. And if this story warmed you, please like, subscribe, and share, so others may feel its light too.